On a typical morning, Seo Hajin reluctantly stirred from her slumber to the echoing call of her mother. After attending to her personal hygiene and donning her chosen attire, she indulged in a moment of self-admiration before the mirror. However, her self-reflection was swiftly interrupted by her father's playful ribbing about her long-standing crush on Sejun, a friend who seemed impervious to her affections. Despite the teasing, her father affectionately handed Seo Hajin 10,000 won, even though her debt to him had ballooned to over 73 million. With the money in hand, Seo Hajin dashed eagerly out the door. Presently, she stood eagerly outside a familiar door, fully aware of its inhabitant. In response to her excitement, a rugged figure emerged, resembling someone straight out of a countryside market, graciously opening the door for her. It turned out to be Sejun's uncle. Learning that Sejun had departed 20 minutes prior, Seo Hajin propelled herself forward, running clumsily while muttering under her breath in determination. Then suddenly, Sejun appeared before her, his familiar shoulder offering solace. Seo Hajin didn't hesitate to jump onto the back of her cherished crush. After a moment of self-reproach for harboring such feelings, Seo Hajin shifted gears, offering Sejun advice on adopting healthier habits. Unable to sway him with words, Seo Hajin resorted to her ultimate tactic, pleading eyes and shimmering gaze. Unable to resist, Sejun pulled her into his embrace, protecting her from the passing traffic. As they stood together, a flock of cotton candy birds drifted by, marking a moment of serenity amidst the bustling morning. At that moment, Sejun found himself seated in class, much like any other day, facing what seemed like a facade. "If you don't buy me a red bean bun, I'll kill you," his classmate Tao would jest, but today it was different. Sejun's patience wore thin, his tolerance reaching its limit. In truth, he knew he shouldn't have acted out of impulse, but by the time he realized it, Sejun had crushed the red bean bun in his hand and forcefully tossed it to the ground. In the end, it all boiled down to that red bean bun. Yet, the red bean bun vendor showed no sympathy for Sejun, opting instead to deliver a barrage of punches to his face. Faced with Sejun's indignation, Hain, the vendor, sarcastically asked if the red bean bun hurt him. In response, Hain lifted a chair and swung it at Sejun's head. But not everything goes as planned. Sejun managed to dodge every swing, just as the situation reached its climax. Just then, Seo Hajin stepped into the room, instantly shifting the atmosphere to one of tension. Seo Hajin coldly brushed past Sejun, standing before Tao, the red bean bun vendor, and inquired about the injury on Sejun's face. They say in life, only women and cowards are difficult to please. But it seemed that Tao hadn't quite grasped that concept. He remained as insolent as ever, mocking Sejun. And of course, every foolish remark has its consequences. Tao's face blurred in the midst of Sejun's internal rage. "I haven't finished explaining yet, and you've already resorted to violence," he thought. Next came the fiery gaze of Seo Hajin, directly subjecting Tao to the sensation of floating through the air. At that moment, at a cafe, Seo Hajin's father was engrossed in conversation with Sejun's uncle, reminiscing about the charming past of Hajin and Sejun. Hajin's father remained a staunch defender of his daughter, who, despite her martial arts training, remained a sweet, innocent young woman. Returning to the previous scene, the sweet young girl who wouldn't harm a fly had just toppled poor Tao over several tables, causing concern for the unfortunate victim's ribs. But it didn't stop there. Sweet young girl Seo Hajin immediately transformed, firmly grasping the neck of the unfortunate victim and locking his arms in a standard Jiu-jitsu hold. In the face of interrogation, daring to mess with her crush, Tao could only struggle to breathe through his bleeding nose. The creation of a murder scene. Sejun, with all his strength, intervened immediately to prevent it. Yet, the 6 bloody punches had already reached his brain. Hajin continued to curse vehemently. At this moment in the corridor, Ki Seok opened the door and asked who Sejun was. After identifying him and learning that Sejun had fought Tao, also known as Choi Jun-sik, before Sejun could finish his sentence, Ki Seok slapped him straight across the face. In the midst of the confusion, all one needed to do was to flash a bright smile. Hence, Sejun grinned, apologizing, and extending an offer to bring Ki Seok some buns as a peace offering, hitting those who run and then running back to get them. Kai Seok decided to forgive Sejun, much to his surprise. But would Ki Seok really let things slide so easily? Outside the school, Ki Seok and his cronies smirked, their intentions inscrutable. The next day, Hajin's desk and clothes were smeared with ink. Everyone feigned ignorance, fearing trouble falling upon themselves. At this moment, Sejun lifted Hajin by the collar and urged her to quickly go to the restroom. After ensuring everything was settled, Sejun's face darkened as he sought out the perpetrator of this incident. He headed straight to Ki Seok's classroom and demanded that he apologize. Hajin immediately took action, arranging for a new desk and purchasing a new uniform for herself. However, Ki Seok remained defiant, denying any involvement. "If it was you, what would you do?" Ki Seok challenged, mocking Sejun's physical prowess. Undeterred by the blatant provocation, Sejun maintained a gentle smile. Ki Seok's cronies, however, couldn't resist the urge to attack Sejun. Before they could react, Sejun had already punched one of them into the locker, leaving them bleeding. As the scene unfolded, another mosquito buzzed into the fray, only to be swiftly dispatched by Sejun's masterful martial arts moves. Seeing their brethren defeated, the remaining mosquito's leader, Ki Seok, decided to confront Sejun himself. But it seemed victory wouldn't come as easily as Sejun had thought. Gasping for breath in the scorching heat of summer, Sejun realized that landing just one punch would secure his win. However, his bulky frame paled in comparison to Ki Seok's agile six-pack physique. Unsuccessful in his attempts to land a blow, Sejun resorted to taunting Ki Seok, distracting him long enough to make a move. Seizing the opportunity, Sejun rushed forward to grab Ki Seok, intending to turn the tables. But all plans came to a halt as Ki Seok swiftly countered, using his leg to trap Sejun and his hand to secure his neck in a chokehold. With every breath Sejun struggled to take, he risked passing out from lack of oxygen. Just then, a pair of pink sandals appeared, causing Ki Seok to lose focus. It was none other than Hajin. Despite Sejun's urgent reminders for her to run, Ki Seok arrogantly grabbed her by the hair, ignoring Sejun's pleas. As Hajin urged Sejun to leave before it was too late, Ki Seok unleashed a barrage of punches, each one as powerful as Saya's. However, Hajin deftly dodged them, then executed a perfect shoulder throw, leaving no room for criticism. She then proceeded to lock Ki Seok's arms with her legs, and, after his desperate pleas for forgiveness, she decided to break his arm. Before leaving, she issued a warning to the mosquitoes, then led Sejun to the infirmary. Thus, an eventful day at school came to an end. On their way home, Hajin teased Sejun relentlessly about his earlier defeat, which seemed to have wounded his male pride. As a result, he decided to head home without taking Hajin to the gym. Upon reaching Sejun's house, he immediately collapsed onto his bed, eager to forget the humiliation of the day. However, he was soon awakened by his brother, who expressed concern about Hajin's well-being. Sejun quickly rushed to the hospital, where he met Hajin's parents. Hajin's mother advised him to stay calm and put on shoes to avoid injuring his feet further, then asked him what had happened. Trembling, Sejun recounted the events, admitting that he had let Hajin go to the stadium alone. At that moment, officers from the Jeongbu police station arrived, wanting to ask Sejun some questions. After some basic inquiries, the police officer concluded that it was a case of group assault and that the perpetrator had not yet been found. He suspected the possibility of Ki Seok and his gang being involved due to their animosity towards Hajin. This statement jogged Sejun's memory of the incident earlier that day when Hajin had confronted the delinquents at school. Sejun immediately reported the identities of the culprits to the police officer, who provided some additional details about the incident. Hajin was discovered in a small alley, with multiple injuries, the most severe of which was to her left knee. Returning to the hospital corridor at that moment, the doctor had already left the operating room, delivering the news of a successful surgery. However, while the physical injuries were on the path to recovery, the emotional wounds remained a concern. Hajin's family surrounded her hospital bed, their attention focused on her well-being. Sejun was present as well, his demeanor reflecting a newfound determination intertwined with simmering resentment. Meanwhile, at the police station, inquiries continued regarding the incident. The perpetrator remained elusive, prompting frustration among those seeking justice. Sejun, unsatisfied with the authorities' progress, resolved to take matters into his own hands. As he turned to leave, the police officer cautioned his subordinates to monitor Sejun's actions, expressing concern for his well-being. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to Ki Seok's intoxicated group, reveling in their merriment. In a nearby alley, a girl stumbled upon Sejun, his steely gaze demanding answers about Hajin's plight. However, the group's indifference was palpable, their laughter a stark contrast to the gravity of the situation. In a swift and decisive move, Sejun confronted Ki Seok, delivering a punch straight to his face. The shock rippled through Ki Seok's companions as they too received Sejun's retribution. Ki Seok, momentarily sobered by the blow, retaliated, initiating a violent struggle. Amidst the chaos, a striking figure emerged, a muscular man with golden locks, his presence commanding attention. With a stern warning, he compelled Ki Seok to release Sejun. Yet, fueled by alcohol-induced bravado, Ki Seok defied the warning, only to face the consequences of his actions. As the tense confrontation unfolded, the muscular man remained composed, dialing the authorities for assistance. Upon hearing the approaching police sirens, Seok and his accomplices swiftly retreated. Sejun, overwhelmed with gratitude, tears streaming down his bruised face, expressed his thanks to the handsome stranger. Sensing Sejun's distress, the man sat beside him and reassured him, calling him a brave soul. Sejun seemed to hear the echoes of his own turmoil. His thoughts shattered before he could voice his concerns. The stranger continued, revealing himself as Hajin's training partner, who often proudly shared Sejun's photos with others. When Sejun inquired about Hajin's condition, the muscular man assured him that she was in a coma due to an altercation with another group. Eager for more information, Sejun eagerly questioned the man about the perpetrators. Without hesitation, the man produced a flyer advertising Jiu-jitsu classes at an unexpectedly low price. Sejun contemplated whether to invest his remaining funds into this opportunity, pondering the stranger's intentions. Suddenly, two unfamiliar individuals appeared behind him, claiming to be gym members. With forceful insistence, they ushered Sejun into an elevator, transporting him to the training room. Amidst the chaotic surroundings, Sejun's gaze met the unmistakable figure of Asen, the muscular man who had aided him the previous night. Haunted by doubts about the unorthodox gym, Sejun found himself confronted by a jovial man wearing a cute sky blue hat. Despite the man's generous offer to reduce the fee to 80,000 won, Sejun remained steadfast in his decision. However, the persistent man, undeterred by Sejun's resolve, dramatically lowered the price to 50,000 won, enticing Sejun with an irresistible bargain. At this moment, Seok's brown-haired friend, resembling a multi-level marketer, began to solicit opinions from customers. Due to Sejun's close relationship with Hajin, his credibility was assured. To everyone's shock, the friend blurted out the phrase, "Free is indeed the best." The man in the blue hat transformed into the gym's instructor, doubling as a shuttle driver to maintain room payments, adding to his already multifaceted role. The brown-haired friend continued, suggesting an ingenious marketing strategy, using Sejun's current physique and future transformation to promote the gym. This sudden stroke of brilliance left the few members in the gym stunned but in agreement. However, amidst the enthusiastic discussion, nobody bothered to ask Sejun if he actually wanted to lose weight. While everyone was engrossed in their conversation, Sejun had to make a quick exit. Yet Asen insisted on escorting him to the changing room. Time flew by swiftly like a running dog in a field, and 3 months had already passed. It was now the deadline for Sejun's weight loss plan, and he had completely transformed into a different person. Back at the gym, the topic shifted to belt promotion. Sensing the mood, the instructor decided to gather everyone and announce the end of today's session. However, Accent didn't forget his mission, to compare Sejun's muscle strength. Despite both being exhausted, postponement wasn't an option. So Sejun decided to pack up and leave with Accent. While training at the park, Sejun was scolded by Asin for struggling on the pull-up bar like a weakling. Not everyone could be a monster like Asin with his 18-pack abs. Eventually, the two of them sat down to rest officially. Accent then brought up Hajin's health, but Sejun's only response was that he hadn't been in contact with her since leaving the hospital. As memories flashed back to the moment Hajin woke up 12 days ago, Sejun hurried back to the hospital, only to be met with Hajin's cold, distant gaze. A few days later, Hajin's family relocated to another city for her psychological treatment. From the police, no further information was extracted about the masterminds behind the attack. Seeing Sejun's determination, Asin advised him that using martial arts to harm others was disgraceful before departing. However, Sejun had already made up his mind 3 months ago. It was time to return to school. Ki Seok reminded Choi Jun-sik to collect money from students and warned them to be careful, especially with Sejun. Meanwhile, Ki Seok was interrupted by a female student who informed him that someone wanted to meet him on the rooftop. Without time to question who it might be, the girl dashed off towards Choi Jun-sik, who, along with his gang, was harassing students in the restroom. Just as they thought everything would go smoothly as usual, a voice suddenly interrupted from behind, revealing the janitor, our protagonist, Sejun. He wasn't afraid of strong opponents, only of foolish teammates. Choi Jun-sik's lackey, with a swollen face, attempted to reciprocate the hospitality, but Sejun grabbed his head and delivered a tender punch directly to his face. With one down, Sejun ordered the rest to leave the restroom to avoid disturbing the janitor. Then, he kicked Choi Jun-sik, who hit the wall directly. Seeing his allies defeated, Choi Jun-sik's face turned green with anger as he rushed forward, accompanied by his friends. However, Sejun effortlessly dodged their attacks and retaliated with 2 punches, knocking down Choi Jun-sik and his companion. Facing such absolute strength, Choi Jun-sik almost wet his pants in fear. Sejun gently grasped Choi Jun-sik's neck with one hand and lifted him effortlessly into the air. Despite Choi's face turning pale from suffocation and fear, Sejun left him with a loving message, asking Choi Jun-sik to convey it to Ki Seok. "I've warmed up. If you dare, come fight me again." On the rooftop of the school building, Ki Seok stood alone, ready to make a call when his phone suddenly rang. It was Choi Jun-sik, dutifully reminding Ki Seok that Sejun was on his way to see him. Upon receiving this information, Ki Seok only wondered why Choi's voice sounded so strange today and decided to go downstairs to check things out. However, before Ki Seok could reach for the doorknob, his face met the door directly due to an external force that knocked him to the ground. It turned out that the person who opened the door was Sejun. It wasn't Ki Seok's fault, it was just the wrong place at the wrong time. Ki Seok, seemingly undeterred, continued to provoke Sejun with mocking words. As his mouth spewed out taunts, he was immediately met with a punch from Sejun. However, Ki Seok's agility was not to be underestimated. He quickly dodged the punch, surprising Sejun. Emboldened by this success, Ki Seok continued to hurl insults at Sejun. But as they say, villains who talk too much never meet a good end. Ki Seok's fate was sealed with another punch from Sejun, delivered in anger and humiliation for not respecting his opponent. In response, Ki Seok landed a punch on Sejun's face, but this only revealed his lack of skill in standing techniques. Sejun quickly spun around, gaining momentum, and struck Ki Seok directly in the face with his elbow. Despite Ki Seok's simple-mindedness, his reflexes were sharp. He turned swiftly to block the blow with his shoulder. Ki Seok then charged forward, screaming and tightly gripping Sejun's legs, attempting to recreate a past encounter. Sejun was ready for this. He raised his knee, striking Ki Seok in the face. It seemed that no matter how well Ki Seok planned, Sejun always had a counter move. Watching Ki Seok struggle reminded Sejun of his own past, nearly suffocating when Asin used his legs to trap him. Asin had taught Sejun the basics of defense, but there was always more to learn about counterattacking. However, for opponents still in training, it's hard to grasp their movements. That's why it's crucial to develop a strategy that combines Jiu-Jitsu with general martial arts, fundamentally creating a comprehensive defense system. Jiu-jitsu is essentially the essence of defense. The image of Accent lying on the ground with his legs up seemed to match Ki-seok's current position. Of course, every fighting style has its strengths and weaknesses, and Ki-seok's current weakness was his thighs. Sejun didn't hesitate and delivered a powerful kick to Ki-seok's thigh. As Ki-seok screamed in agony, Sejun grabbed both of his legs and threw him forcefully, disrupting Ki-seok's defense. Then, Sejun gathered momentum and kneed Ki-seok in the thigh. At this point, Ki-seok realized that Sejun had been learning Jiu-jitsu somewhere. Sejun was now completely in control of the fight. Because it was so easy, Sejun felt a deep sense of fear of Asen. But Ki-seok's stubbornness was persistent, like a cockroach crawling out of a drain. He continued to mock and even dared to insult Hajin, saying Hajin looked like a lost dog when he was beaten. Just as Sejun was about to knock out more of Ki-seok's teeth with a punch, Ki-seok said something unbelievable. On that day, he said that if Hajin had brought Sejun to him, he would have spared Hajin. But Sejun hadn't answered Hajin's call for help. Hearing this, Sejun's heart skipped a beat, and the image of Hajin's cold stare in the hospital flashed before him. Taking advantage of this moment, Ki-seok counterattacked, jumping up and kicking Sejun in the face, but Sejun quickly blocked it with his hand. Seeing that Sejun wasn't affected, Ki-seok continued to punch Sejun in the face, but Sejun retaliated by kicking Ki-seok's face and using a spiderweb defense to block all of Ki-seok's attacks. Tolerating punches and living in silence. "You're disgusting," Sejun said. During the struggle, Sejun retracted his leg and kicked Ki-seok in the stomach, turning the tables and pinning Ki-seok's arm. Ignoring Ki-seok's nonsense, Sejun clenched his fists and landed several punches on his face. "Trash is still just trash. I'll repay 100 times what you did to Hajin. One by one," Sejun said as Ki-seok's bruised face pleaded for mercy. But it wasn't that easy. Sejun forced him to name everyone who had hurt Hajin. The cockroach Ki-seok tried to use his fake innocence to secretly attack Sejun again, but Sejun saw through these useless tricks. Without mercy, he applied an Americana shoulder lock, causing Ki-seok to scream in pain. Ki-seok, with his slow wit, had only two choices: name all those who harmed Hajin or go home to join his ancestors. Losing patience with Ki-seok's stupidity, Sejun gave him 3 seconds to decide. In the third second, just as the pain made Ki-seok feel like he might lose his left arm, he finally screamed out a name: Sun Jo-hyun. Sun Jo-hyun was a senior in his 3rd year at the same school and seemed to be the ringleader in the incident involving Hajin. Not stopping there, Sejun continued to pressure Ki-seok, forcing him to reveal that there were a few others from different schools involved as well. However, Ki-seok was just a minor player and didn't have detailed information. At that moment, the teacher appeared and saved Ki-seok's life from Sejun's final blow. It seemed like Ki-seok had narrowly escaped before Sejun left. Sejun forcefully threw him to the ground, making a reference to an old Vietnamese saying, "It's not New Year's yet, buddy. Only a long road reveals whether the horse is good or not." Meanwhile, in the principal's office, a heated argument broke out between the teacher, the principal, and Ki-seok's father over Sejun's violent behavior, which led to Ki-seok being expelled from school. However, the main character in the story seemed to pay little attention to this. He was only focused on Ki-seok's confession on the rooftop. A woman in a red dress entered the room, appearing to be Ki-seok's mother. She ignored her husband and walked straight to Sejun, raising her hand to slap him. Reflexively, Sejun used his hand to deflect the slap, stunning everyone and momentarily freezing the atmosphere. To diffuse the tension, Ki-seok's father intervened, apologizing and explaining that his son's injuries were severe due to Sejun's one-sided attack. However, Ki-seok's mother seemed determined to see Sejun punished. Surprised by this turn of events, the principal explained to Sejun's father about Ki-seok's high level of injuries and how Sejun had attacked Ki-seok unilaterally. Seeing the tense situation, Sejun's father continuously apologized, but Ki-seok's mother remained unyielding, accusing Sejun of being a troublemaker. She arrogantly declared that they were of a higher class and dared to challenge the dignity of their boss, Sejun. Seeing his father's change in attitude becoming aggressive, Ki-seok's father decided to use his connections. He made a phone call to someone, and on the other end, an enthusiastic voice responded, asking what was needed. Sejun's father intended to ask a favor from the chairman, but it seemed like it was just a simple matter. The chairman immediately asked about Sejun's condition, but Sejun's father lied, saying they had been in a motorcycle accident with him. Hearing this, everyone expressed concern for Sejun's injuries. With that, the discussion about punishment was put on hold for the time being. On the way home, Sejun apologized to his father for causing trouble. He knew it might have been because of Hajin, but his father still wanted to remind him that violence is never justified. Back at the training room, 6 pairs of eyes were extremely surprised by Sejun's injuries. They couldn't believe someone had been beaten to such an extent. To avoid further worry, Sejun lied and said he had fallen off a motorcycle with his father. Hearing this, everyone sympathetically asked about his injuries and his condition. So, the marketing strategy had to be put on hold for a few more nights. But how could those injuries go unnoticed? The teacher, who had lived half a lifetime, told Sejun that anyone who uses Jiu-jitsu outside of competitions will be a lifelong failure. However, he added that if circumstances force it, one can only use it for self-defense or to protect others. It was a rare philosophical lesson, leaving the students awestruck. In the final stages, after the chaos subsided, everyone returned to class, worried about Sejun's well-being. So, the teacher decided to go easy on him. But when Sejun insisted on giving his all, the teacher removed his glasses and applied a kimura lock, causing Sejun to flatten like a pancake, followed by a series of falls due to an armbar submission. But at this moment, Jo Hyun suddenly grabbed the collar of his shirt and pulled him back, then aggressively lunged forward, thrusting into the stomach of the bald-headed guy. After that came a series of dodging punches, smooth as shampoo, leaving the tattooed gang members stunned and bewildered, unable to believe their eyes at their comrade's losing face. The boss decided to take the stage. If I can't beat him with my fists, I'll use something hot. In his hand, he wielded a long iron rod and swung it forcefully at Jo Hyun's head. But luckily, he managed to block the attack just in time. As he swung the rod and cursed Jo Hyun, calling him names, a brick came flying from Sejun's position as a footballer. Seeing the rod, Sejun didn't hesitate to use it, and neither did the brick hesitate to meet its target. Sejun turned to Jo Hyun, reminding him to pay attention and act quickly. If he liked to run, then follow him. There was no time to waste on fighting. Sejun's decisive actions left Jo Hyun shocked. The tattooed guy still sat on the ground, wailing, but Sejun's words were clear. If you're good, then run to the container. I'll find you soon. Jo Hyun immediately followed Sejun, but it seemed like after today's events, his future didn't look good. After running for a while, Jo Hyun asked Sejun where they were headed. To the police station? Who knows where they might end up running to? Jo Hyun felt he should have killed Sejun then and there. The two decided to head to the police station, with the gang members of the bald guy following closely behind. Jo Hyun cursed as he ran, criticizing Sejun for acting without thinking, and Sejun fired back. They decided to hide in a nearby house to throw off their pursuers. But this small trick might not work on the tattooed guy, who had been around society for so long. He instructed his gang members to bring all the necessary weapons and prepare for the main course. Sejun and Jo Hyun dashed frantically along the corridor, with Sejun saying this was their training spot, open 24/7, which impressed Jo Hyun. But when the gym door was pushed open, Jo Hyun froze in shock, because before them stood Asin and two students, slurping noodles, looking completely harmonious and warm. The elevator door opened, revealing the scar-faced boss with a lever and two lackeys. They decided they had to gradually drive Sejun and Jo Hyun out. The boss looked at the three who had just finished eating and asked if they had seen the two delinquents. When he was about to step into the gym, Asin shouted loudly, causing the gang members to startle. Did you know that Asin, with his six-pack, had to diligently exercise on the mat, whether it was difficult or not? It was truly impolite. The scar-faced guy still looked blankly as Asin spoke about him. Asin didn't care about his concerns. He simply threatened him lightly, asking if he wanted to take off his shoes faster or if Asin should dial 112 faster. The scar-faced guy laughed and then spat a large glob of flame onto the mat. Not only that, but also kicked it up with his foot while mocking Asin. The scar-faced guy issued a threat, wanting to shut down Asin's gym. As they were in the heat of the moment, Asin raised his phone, indicating that the plan wasn't going according to script. As the hands were quicker than the mind, the boss immediately grabbed a sewage pipe and slammed Asin's phone to the ground. Asin looked solemnly at his scratched hand, realizing that he had chosen death. The thugs, still arrogant, continued to challenge Asin. The boss gave him two options: either surrender or he would destroy the gym. Suddenly, Asin's muscular body struck the boss's eyes. Despite his attractive appearance, his body was covered in scars from knife wounds. The boss thought Asin had a backing, which is why he warned him. Asin would make him regret his actions. However, Asin had to ask if he was a minor. The boss confidently dismissed this, mocking Asin like he was a bowl of incense. Asin nonchalantly took the incense from his mouth. He told the boss that he would make him regret his actions. The boss threatened Asin again, demanding that he hand over the other two guys. Asin agreed, causing the boss's incense-lighting action to pause. Was it that easy? But Asin had a condition: to play rock, paper, scissors with him. If the boss won, Asin would agree to anything. As soon as the boss agreed and began the game, he found himself spinning like a fool. In the end, Asin had the hammer, and the boss had the incense. Because of this fortunate chance, Asin casually slapped him, making his face turn. Meanwhile, Sejun and Jo Hyun were sitting next to each other. Jo Hyun was busy texting his mom, informing her that he wouldn't be home tonight. When Sejun asked about it, Jo-hyun explained that he messaged his mom to be cautious because these guys were ruthless. However, Jo-hyun couldn't shake off his worries, as they were all violent thugs. Sejun then brought up Hajin's issue and asked Jo-hyun to continue talking about what happened that day. Jo-hyun explained what he knew about the different school factions and their elimination-style competitions, where everyone had to pay a fee to participate, and the higher-ranking individuals received a portion of the total fee. Suddenly, there was an event, the Ivan match, which was coercive in nature, and Hajin was invited, but since he wasn't interested, Jo-hyun left. Therefore, he didn't know what happened afterward. Hearing this, Sejun punched Jo-hyun and interrogated him, questioning why he didn't intervene if he knew it was wrong. Ultimately, Sejun accused Jo-hyun and his gang of being no different from trash. Faced with Sejun's accusation, Jo-hyun could only remain silent, as there was nothing wrong with what he did. Just as the tension was high, there was a knock on the door. Turning back to the gym entrance, the boss collapsed to the ground, shouting at his foolish underlings to understand that Asen would come in and kill them for attacking him. One thug rushed forward with a stick, but Asen simply lifted his hand to block and then kicked the thug's knee joint. This kick was enough to break his leg into 2 pieces. While not paying attention, the bald-headed guy rushed to attack the remaining 2 students, but before he could get close to his target, Asen used his belt to strike him straight in the mouth. Surely, these chickens didn't know Asen's least favorite was gangsters. As he tightened the bald guy's neck, he warned them to be careful, otherwise he might break their necks or backs. So please hold onto your weapons tightly, dear friends. The thugs trembled at his words but still tried to act tough. Upon hearing the bald guy's slogan, everyone unanimously rushed forward. An ear slap, a wrist lock, and a twist, and just like that, another chicken had to bid farewell to its wing. To show that he knew how to exploit all of his opponent's advantages, Asen used him as a shield for the attacks. He snatched the weapon from the bald guy and swung it straight into the face of the bald-headed one behind him. While the bald guy was still stunned, he quickly locked his opponent's shoulder and forcefully pressed down with his leg, rendering the second chicken wingless. Without hesitation, the fattest thug appeared behind him. But how could Asen allow him to execute his intended plan smoothly? He immediately grabbed the chubby thug's hand and twisted it backward before wrapping the belt around his neck and knocking him unconscious to the ground. If there were any personnel left, they should come at once, or else Asen's tteokbokki would get cold now. The boss, with the incense in his mouth, seemed not to understand his situation very well, so he just stood there amazed. Asen turned around, only to find that his 2 students had been subdued by the boss's underlings. While the boss mocked and wielded his mashite menacingly, he approached Asen. Just as he was about to stab, Asen turned back and warned him that if he held that knife, he would have to bet his own life. The scar-faced man froze, doubting whether the author was playing games by portraying Asen so heroically. What was he going to do with all of Asen's students? It wouldn't be difficult to deal with them one by one. Realizing his defeat, the boss tried to retreat, but Asen grabbed him, saying, "Mouth, I'll leave your teeth intact for now." Then, Jo-hyun added another punch for good measure. "There's a no smoking sign here," he said, as Sejun kicked the boss's butt. The mashite of the scar-faced thug flew out of his hand, injuring him. Just as his underlings each pulled out a knife, there was a knock at the door from outside. It was the handsome police officers representing justice. They swiftly drew their guns to stabilize the situation. Ignoring his underlings' advice to retreat, the scar-faced man turned arrogantly toward the police officers' guns, treating them like toys for girls, just for show. Before he could finish his sentence, the buttocks of his pants had already made contact with the electrodes. All thanks to the newcomer's efforts. This guy seemed familiar with the 2 police officers. He quickly rushed forward, delivering a blow to the bald guy's chin and then smacking the bald-headed one's ear. He would act on behalf of state power to crush you all, you trash thugs. The handsome police officer representing justice handed a shiny handcuff to the tattooed guy. Although his hands were cuffed, his mouth remained uncuffed. The tattooed guy turned back, grinding his teeth in frustration. "None of you play the police, do you? Do you know who my dad is? You dare touch me, he sneered. Okay, no more hands. I'll use my feet then. It'll be more enjoyable for you, and you'll get what you wished for. The black-haired brother, who had a connection with the police, whispered menacingly. If you open your mouth again, you're dead for sure, he threatened. Despite receiving several kicks, the tattooed guy remained defiant, disrespecting the black-haired brother. He was confident that even if he committed a crime, he would remain innocent until proven guilty. So the scar-faced guide reminded the black-haired brother to be careful with his mouth. Oh, my mouth. Let me use the muscle power of my neurons to enlighten you, the black-haired brother replied before delivering a painful blow that made the tattooed guy tremble. The police officer then turned to ask if everyone was uninjured. Without hesitation, Hain complained, "My whole body is aching right now." Meanwhile, the guys who had attacked earlier were lying on the ground in pain. But for Hain, the most important thing was to ask the police officer to take off his shoes. The police officer, feeling embarrassed, apologized and asked if they could provide a brief account of the incident, because the thugs would surely call their lawyers. Jo-hyun stepped forward, volunteering to explain as it stemmed from his personal matter. Sejun stood silently beside him, worried that the police might investigate Hajin's case, which could complicate matters. At the police station, the thug complained bitterly, claiming that he was just asking questions gently. He couldn't believe that the muscular guy had taken the initiative to silence him with his belt. The police officer didn't buy it and threatened him to stop talking nonsense. The hospital was busy with emergency cases, so they should endure it for now. The police officer then turned to Sejun's group, relieved that they were unharmed. At the Jiang police station, there was a patrol, so they arrived promptly. The police officer continued to inquire whether Sejun had reported to the police. Upon receiving his confirmation, the officer handed Sejun a business card as a reminder that if he needed urgent assistance, he could contact him directly. However, the officer couldn't understand why young people like Sejun would get involved with the thugs at the end of the street. When Jo-hyun seemed hesitant, Sejun quickly intervened, stating that they had threatened their senior due to unpaid debts. Jo-hyun looked over, his eyes piercing, and the officer then mentioned the incident today, wondering if it was related to the student Hajin. He emphasized the importance of any information, no matter how small, in aiding the investigation. But Sejun just smiled, claiming ignorance despite having already disclosed all the information. Jo-hyun appeared to be quietly investigating, which raised suspicions. When the officer couldn't extract any more information from Sejun, he turned to Jo-hyun, asking if he had anything to say. Jo-hyun hesitantly replied that his information matched Sejun's, and that he couldn't be coerced into providing more. With a message to report any further details directly to the police, the officer turned to the next person, Hain. Eventually, Accent, having endured 8 hours of interrogation, was finally finished. As everyone dispersed, Accent lamented missing out on tteokbokki at home, and when he saw Hain planning to resolve the unfinished tteokbokki from the previous night, 2 eager students joined him, chatting cheerfully. Meanwhile, Jo-hyun lagged behind, apologizing for the mess in the training room and offering to help clean up. Suddenly, Hain called him over and asked if he liked tteokbokki, suggesting it could be a new beginning for Jo-hyun. With laughter and cheerfulness, everyone enjoyed themselves at the restaurant. And the victim of this joke was none other than Jo-hyun. He looked big and sturdy but couldn't handle spicy food. Sweat was dripping profusely from his forehead. Hain finally asked him how much he owed. Jo-hyun didn't hide it. He admitted that he owed 5,000 won in interest every month. In the past, because his mother worked extra shifts, Jo-hyun had to take on additional construction work to pay off the debt. However, the person he owed not only didn't reduce the debt, but also increased the interest. Hearing this, everyone not only remained unmoved but also criticized him, saying he was truly worthless. Jo-hyun could only sigh and admit that he was indeed worthless, but he reassured Hain not to worry, as he was the kind of garbage that could be recycled with a high content of good fertilizer. Hain offered to help him erase that debt if Jo-hyun was willing to turn his life around. The next day, amidst the astonished looks of everyone, Jo-hyun and Sejun walked together to school. Jo-hyun asked Sejun if he would go to the training room after class. Sejun didn't hesitate to say that he would, and Jo Hyun knew he had to go along. There was no escaping it. It's clear that the mess in the gym wasn't caused by you. Jo Hyun also has responsibility, and there are still many things to learn and do. Jo Hyun somewhat bewilderedly agrees, yes, I should do everything. Sejun then leaves, not forgetting to remind Jo Hyun to arrange his tasks and get things in order. Ki Seok and Choi Jun-sik peek from under the corridor, overhearing the entire conversation. Ki Seok curses, wondering what Jo Hyun is up to and why the two of them are hanging out together. Did he miss something? Jun-sik anxiously looks at his accomplices, wondering if their position in Jo Hyun's heart is shaken or not. So how will Sejun's revenge for getting punched in the mouth be calculated? Ki Seok hears this and accuses him of messing with his manhood. Ki Seok assures him he was just momentarily off guard. Meanwhile, behind the building, Jo Hyun and Ki Seok face each other. Jo Hyun asks Ki Seok about collecting money from the second-year students, noting that the list hasn't seen any progress. Ki Seok blames Sejun for hindering him and boasts about his diligent training, confident he will defeat Jo Hyun. Jo Hyun laughs it off, not wanting to crush his dreams, and changes the subject. Jo Hyun mentions the second-year students being extorted and says he needs to meet them personally. He asks Ki Seok to take him to each one after school. Ki Seok's mind wanders, thinking Jo Hyun has run out of patience and plans to deal with the second-year students. After school, Ki Seok leads him to Sejun's classroom. Jo Hyun goes straight to his desk, addressing Aeon Hyunso, saying it must be him. The red bean bread murder case, remember? Hyunso, confused, starts sweating nervously. Jo Hyun's sudden action leads Ki Seok, Hyunso, and everyone in the class stunned. Jo Hyun confronts Hyunso, a flashback to that day, with Asen mumbling nonsense about principles and asking him to choose. Jo Hyun doesn't hesitate, saying it must be for the deserving. Asen is pleased with the answer, worrying that Hyunso apologizes, but the victim only satisfies their own guilt. So, standing on the side of the person receiving the apology, they won't get anything. Asen hoped that when Jo Hyun performed that apology, he would show how they themselves didn't have any fault in order to make them feel better. Returning to the present, Jo Hyun is kneeling down, apologizing to Hyunsu for making him suffer before. Ki Seok rushes forward, yelling loudly, "What are you doing, senior? If you don't want to join in, just shut up." Jo Hyun glances at him. "Opportunities come quickly, buddy." Ki Seok doesn't care, he's furious. How dare Jo Hyun hypocritically apologize, making him lose face. Jo Hyun stands up and declares from now on, they won't use force to collect money from students anymore. And of course, Jo Hyun also refuses to participate in dirty competitions. Ki Seok still bewilderedly asks why, and Jo Hyun simply replies, "If you don't like it, let's have a fight." Hearing the word fight, Ki Seok immediately backs off, saying he's too sudden, just confused. Then he runs out of the classroom straight to the door, where he meets Sejun. It seems like the two missing teeth from the rooftop fight have been replaced, so Ki Seok's mouth isn't hesitating to spew some kind words to him. Sejun, unimpressed with the basics, concludes that it's because of Jo Hyun's brain, adding a few more wrinkles, making it not as smooth as Ki Seok's. Without Ki Seok's relentless braking, Jo Hyun confidently steps forward, ready for a dental checkup for Ki Seok. Ki Seok sees this and decides it's not convenient today, suggesting they meet another day. Hyunsu tries to pull Jo Hyun up to talk. After a while of tugging and pulling, both of them were able to talk to each other. Jo Hyun hoped for forgiveness, and also hoped Hyunsu wouldn't dwell on trivial matters. He assured him that any wrongdoing was on his part. He hoped Hyunsu wouldn't despise himself or his life because of it, and promised to make it up to him. Jo Hyun handed him a red notebook, hoping he could track the amount of money taken, and he would try to repay it gradually. Hyunsu was still a bit overwhelmed, but a brighter future lay ahead. Sejun stood outside the classroom, choosing not to enter. Suddenly, long hair swept past his neck. Sweeping past the neck seems too sweet, it should be a tight grip. Sejun thought, given his current situation. That was Hajin, who had become much prettier. The two walked together on the street. Hajin reminded him about the occasional wounds on Sejun's face, which worried his father. Sejun casually attributed it to vigorous training with everyone, then changed the subject. It was snowing, Christmas Day, a new page for everyone. Jo Hyun and Sejun went to school together. Jo Hyun briefly explained the rules of the situation Hajin faced. In simple terms, the competition was divided into various categories, including one Jo Hyun participated in, which was the law category. Additionally, there would be categories that didn't follow any rules, and the more dangerous they were, the higher the rewards. But above all, whoever knew about the existence of the school organizers suddenly appearing to invite potential participants. Not only that, there would be someone always watching to see if participants had any other intentions. That person would be one of the managers, referred to as the kin team leader. As the elevator was about to close, a figure rushed in, not a police officer or anything. He apologized for his haste and asked which floor. After he answered, the police officer pressed floor 20. The guy's arm hesitated for a moment, then pressed 19 immediately after. Clearly, he was very cautious. When he stepped out of the elevator to go to the 19th floor, the police officer arranged his thoughts clearly. He had never seen the people on the top floor, but he hesitated to press the button, or maybe he was just too sensitive. The police officer's arm blocked the door, causing it to stop closing. Sensitivity was indeed crucial for a police officer. He could be sure this person was involved in Hajin's case. He quickly followed Kim Kia, and after a while, the guy stopped in front of a room. The truth was about to be revealed. While hanging in suspense, the phone rang, startling him. Who doesn't know how to set their phone to vibrate? The police officer picked up the call. When it ended, the guy walked into the room, room 1903. After a moment's distraction, the person on the other side of the line announced that the thugs had been released. The police officer cursed repeatedly. Finally, who's the idiot who gave that order? Then he left. The guy with glasses, seeing no more commotion, opened the door. He informed someone at the other end of the line that the police had left. He suspected it was related to Hajin in the alley where the hooligans were released. Although it's a bit surprising to be released early like this, everything seems to be going smoothly now. He swore he would beat them to a pulp without missing anyone who was cursing fervently. Just as he was about to deny it, under the threat of the boss, Changle had to admit that occasionally he got involved in some dirty business. Just to keep things under control, he would take a drag and the blood would flow, making a mess. He couldn't understand why, after so many years without seeing each other, suddenly he came to beat him like that. Cha Nuok had reminded him to quit the bloodsucking business, then asked him to hand over the contract of Jo Hyun-ra's father. Curious as to how the boss knew about Jo Hyun, Chi said the person next to him would provide the answer. Probably fooled by the drag, now Changle noticed that there was a girl wearing sunglasses and a hat sitting next to him. Isn't she Essen's colleague? Changle's subordinate wanted to step in to see what was going on, but was stopped by the guys from Cha Nuok. It's better to keep your life if you don't want to get involved. Of course, if you want to, you have to get through Tao's fists first. The door was locked again before Changle's bewildered face. So shall we begin, sis? The girl dismissed everything. Everything has to have an opening statement first. Let me confide a little with him first. Worried, he kept turning to ask her continuously who she was and what she was doing here. If she knew Jo Hyun. She didn't know that person, but he might know. That long-haired, dead-eyed guy looks like that. If he asks for help from Tao, she won't hesitate to ask him to drag out the contract. Changle reluctantly agreed. What kind of guy dares to meddle in his business? The words of those scum are not worthy of respect, because they only show off their noble and righteous ideals. She gave him a mouthful of flowers. Just now, it was the drag on the left. Now it's the flower pot on the right, just enough. The Changle teen rushed over in anger, intending to punch her but was covered by a vest. Then, she gave him a straight kick, making him fall back. Not stopping there, the girl jumped up, gaining momentum, and kneeled heavily on the thug's chest. She laughed heartily with a mouthful. It's truly this feeling. Then, she maximized her productivity with both hands, punching Changle repeatedly in the face. Shin Jo Hyun happily punched and supported while Changle continued to resist. That's when she felt a sense of accomplishment in her punch. Right after that statement, Changle didn't hesitate to show his masculinity, giving her a punch. However, Jo-hyun, who is still larger than life, swiftly twisted Changle's hand, making him wince in pain. He threatened her to quickly let go, or he wouldn't stop. Okay, now let's start the lesson from the beauty. How people's emotional changes depend on the degree of bone joint changes. With just one twist, Jo-hyun shocked Changle horizontally, screaming in pain and curses. He threatened to turn her whole family into kimchi. It seems like these thugs have a high endurance level, but are also very talkative. So Jo-hyun called Young-ho and told him to find a butt-wiping cloth to shove in Changle's mouth. She was getting a headache. Young-ho enthusiastically suggested his socks that had been worn for 2 days, which seemed suitable but might not be enough. So, Young-ho asked Cha Nuok how long his socks had been worn. Okay, 5 days, you can take them, he replied. Jo-hyun approved and stuffed both socks into his mouth. A week is perfect. In helpless resistance, Changle was stuffed with stinky socks like marinated shrimp paste. Jo-hyun was delighted to see this expression. It was rewarding to see the victims he had exploited. You have to know that. So, let's go back to teacher Jo-hyun's lesson. Level 1, Finger Reversal. Changle screams silently in pain. Jo-hyun seemed dissatisfied with this expression. Just one finger, and it's like facing death. She was even planning to break the table. Endure it. Let's continue. Fingers 2, 3, 4. The screams continued until dusk. Changle was allowed to remove the gag to review and provide feedback on today's lesson from teacher Jo-hyun. She gently asked him if he had calmed down a bit for us to talk gently, or if she should add a few more toes. Changle almost wet his pants in fear. If more toes are added, he won't just calm down, he'll go into a super coma. He hugged his shattered arm, trembling, and promised to bring the contract to her. Big sister, wait for me a little while. Sui was very satisfied with the success of her lesson. By the way, she also wanted to ask him something. Finally, how much does he know about the dark web? Meanwhile, in the gym, Accent was enjoying the good sleep when the phone rang. He drowsily answered, it was Jo-hyun calling. He asked her to transfer the call to someone named Kia. Changle answered, so it was Asin. He has kept his promise, she'll regret it. Are you satisfied yet, or do you need me to explain a little more? Changle hurriedly said loudly that he regretted it. He promised not to mess around with the kids anymore. Asin also reminded him to take care of his friend everywhere, because everything isn't finished yet. After finishing the call, Asin immediately called. Jo-hyun was diligently cleaning the gym when he announced that the debt owed by his family had been completely cleared. Tomorrow, he would bring a legally valid invoice for her to take home to her mother. Jo-hyun sincerely thanked him. Asin urged him to quickly finish cleaning up so they could go for a hot meal. Jo-hyun went into the restroom, sent a text to inform her mother that the debt had been forgiven, then immediately hugged her head and cried uncontrollably. After a satisfying meal and a bit of drinking, Accent, Sejun, and Jo-hyun-rae left the store. Asin said goodbye to the 2 kids, letting them go home first as he had an appointment. It seemed like fate, so Jo-hyun and Sejun went in the same direction. Sejun asked if he knew which schools were participating in that dark competition. If they couldn't get into their hideout, the only way was to make them appear on their own. So it might be a good idea to inquire about a few shrimp in the pond. Then Jo-hyun asked how he planned to fight. Sejun naively said simply to find their school and pick a fight. Before Sejun could finish, Jo-hyun cut in. He just wanted to scold him for not using his brain. Jo-hyun felt his head pounding. He told him to wait while he gathered information and found some easy targets to beat first. Sejun was curious if the senior was also planning to participate. He felt that this was partly Jo-hyun's doing, so he would help as much as he could. Sejun intended to refuse, but if providing information could alleviate his guilt, then he could do that. However, Jo-hyun immediately denied it. He wouldn't pretend anymore, but would reform himself with both of them, which was better than just one. Sejun agreed to let him participate, but with one condition. Those involved with Hajin would be dealt with by his hand. That's the decision then. In a high-class apartment, Manager Kim reported on the previous police officer who was still investigating the case related to Hajin. The officer in white praised him without reserve, saying he was a very honest policeman. They didn't know how long this would last. Would he be like those dogs, tucking his tail after stumbling a couple of times? Manager Kim asked the boy if he knew Jo Hyun or his creditor. He started telling him about Hajin's friend, Sejun, who couldn't stand a bit of hardship when she was beaten. He planned to make a school action drama, with the main content being a righteous avenger seeking revenge for himself. But Sejun didn't answer his call, so the script was left in limbo. The young man sighed regretfully. So what does Jo Hyun have to do with Sejun? Manager Kim analyzed it, seeming to align with Sejun's intentions and the previous discussion with Jo Hyun. However, the guy Kia immediately stopped him. Let them do whatever they want. Leave the event unfinished for now, because to develop it further, it needs to be made really big. A high school student taking revenge for his girlfriend sounds exciting just to hear, and he's also very interested in Sejun. He wants to find out what Sejun is up to now. In the park, a boy in red pajamas stumbled and apologized to the head guy in yellow sunglasses. He was furious that the boy dared to use the money to buy underwear instead of handing it over to him. So, the head guy punched the boy and continued to interrogate him. Is your underwear more important than Tao? The guy was about to continue when the boy in red pajamas dared to reach out to help. If you can, please help him. So, he made a wish. Seeing Jo Hyun appear, he punched the lackeys of the head guy in yellow sunglasses. The head guy was puzzled. He asked if there had been any recent events or why he was appearing here. Jiahui looked at him with disgust and then introduced him to an 18-year-old, beautiful but somewhat violent, named Sejun. Returning a few minutes earlier, Jo Hyun and Sejun were making their way to the park to find someone named Kim Jung-gi. Jo Hyun wasn't certain if he would be there, but this area was usually his stomping ground. Sejun wondered if this Kim Jung-gi was a rapper. Jo Hyun immediately denied it. No way, she said. Kim Jung-yu is more like a chaotic, violent dog. Sejun seemed surprised. If he's like a dog, he must bark aggressively, he remarked. Sejun continued, asking if there were two of them, and if the other one couldn't fight back either. Contrary to Sejun's assumption, Jo Hyun explained that the other guy was the real threat, camouflaged under a human facade. He had trained to a high level, and given their current abilities, they would be overpowered by him. Jo Hyun reminded Sejun that to reach their goal, they needed to proceed step by step, as rushing would only result in unnecessary harm. Their clear strategy, symbolized by the earplugs Sejun gave to the yellow-haired thug, seemed like it would lead to a showdown, but the thug collapsed at the mere sight of them. Sejun then asked if the guy in the red shirt was injured. You could say that, Jo Hyun sarcastically replied. Sejun insisted that the guy shouldn't blame himself for being bullied. He handed the red-shirted guy a shirt and advised him to seek help and continue fighting to defend himself. While Sejun could help him, he couldn't accompany him throughout his life. The guy in red, still dazed, accepted the shirt and left. Now back to the yellow-haired thug, Jo Hyun and Sejun looked at him as he sobbed uncontrollably, seemingly itching all over. Sejun abruptly pulled his nose ring, causing the thug to wake up in shock. Seeing the chaos, Sejun instinctively punched him. He grabbed the thug's collar and demanded answers, suggesting they find a more relaxed place to talk things over. Jung-yu reluctantly released his grip and said, "Fine, let go of me. Whatever you want to know, ask. Let's go somewhere chill." Jo Hyun chimed in, "You better save up for that shirt. It'll take you ages to afford one." "All right, let's settle this for you," Sejun concluded. Sejun stepped on his chest, finding leverage, then forcefully tore apart his expensive shirt. The bewildered Jung-yu shouted out loud, "What are you doing? Do you understand what manners are?" It's true what Sejun predicted. Dogs bark a lot. As he firmly gripped Jung-yu's mouth. "You cherish this worthless shirt. Yet, you treat others like discarded objects. What kind of person does that make you?" The unyielding Sejun decided to take action, twisting Jung-yu's arm, causing him pain. He promised to spill everything Sejun asked, as long as he released his grip. Sejun then got straight to the point. He wanted to know everything Jung-yu knew about the name Seo Hajin. Jung-yu quickly responded, knowing that she was both beautiful and kind, as if he remembered her features faster than his own thoughts. Sejun warned him not to speak about his crush in front of him, or he'd get punched. Jung-yu, realizing his mistake, reluctantly began recounting the events of that day. However, Sejun interrupted him with a few punches. What he wanted to hear about were the names of the managers. Jung-yu seemed alarmed, wondering if he knew what was going on. Nevertheless, he trembled as he answered. On that day, Hajin's match was filmed, likely broadcasted live. The footage on the camera revealed a boy standing next to manager Kim that day. He briefly introduced Hajin and agreed with the sentiment that Jiu-jitsu was the only martial art where women could beat men, but only if the opponent was male and hadn't studied Jiu-jitsu. This intrigued him greatly. Today, our key player is a girl who's just earned her purple belt at only 18, an impressive feat at her age. He then explained his plan to select 4 people to fight Hajin at different skill levels, with the first match featuring someone who had never studied Jiu-jitsu, prompting Jung-yu to volunteer. As the match began, he hoped that Jung-yu would leave an impression on the upper echelons. Just as Jung-yu was about to join the fight, he received a punch from Sejun. He was caught off guard, unable to react in time, and then compelled to continue his story. And of course, as expected, what was bound to happen occurred. With his amateur skills, Jung-yu found himself choked by Hajin, struggling for breath. Hajin, indifferent to their intentions behind the match, had only one thing on her mind, where Sejun was. Her faux-faced brother responded to her with a fake smile, claiming that her chubby friend wasn't present. Hearing this, Hajin furiously attempted to strike Ki Seok for deceiving and luring her here. If Sejun wasn't around, staying there would have no purpose, she thought. But with the bait already swallowed, who would let go now? Ki Seok proposed a good deal, promising her freedom even if she refused to comply. However, the burly bodyguard wasn't entirely sure he could let Hajin walk out of the room. Hajin warned them that their actions were serious crimes, enough to warrant police involvement. Yet, Ki Seok remained calm, citing security reasons for her inability to leave. All she had to do was agree to participate in 4 matches, and he would let her go. He also promised that her friend Sejun wouldn't face any trouble at school anymore. Although Ki Seok agreed to let her go, he had no authority to speak here. Despite this, Hajin remained stubborn. She didn't know who he was or had any interest in participating in the match. So to quickly get her out, they decided to head towards Goat office. This move prompted them to instruct their comrades to bring Sejun, as per the original plan. This statement halted Hajin in her tracks, and she was drawn back into the ongoing fight with Jung-yu. As the match began, Jung-yu analyzed Hajin, convinced she would choose a defensive strategy. As long as he remained proactive in his attacks, victory would be assured. Hajin didn't hesitate, kicking straight into his stomach. Lucky for Jung-yu, just a bit lower, and he would have bid farewell to his longtime companion. Jung-yu, slightly surprised, didn't expect such force from the petite Hajin. While lost in thought, Hajin swiftly leaped up, executing a mid-air spin, aiming another kick. Yet, Jung-yu, quick on his feet, managed to evade, narrowly missing a facial injury. "If you think I'll back down from now on, you're wrong," he exclaimed loudly, determined. "I won't yield anymore, nor do I need to," he added defiantly. Hajin dodged his punch, swiftly maneuvering behind him, gripping Jung-yu's leg firmly. With a swift spin, she toppled him to the ground, swiftly mounting him. Hajin delivered a series of punches from behind before swiftly locking his arms around his neck. In those moments, as if bidding a final farewell to the last remnants of camaraderie, Hajin released her hold, declaring the match over. She then invited the next contender to take their place, while Sejun reminded him sternly, "It's best you don't tell them you passed out, or else I'll make you regret it by smashing your head into the ground." Jung-yu promptly retracted his denial, claiming he merely blacked out briefly and then regained consciousness. By the time he came to, the second match had already concluded. However, Hajin appeared slightly fatigued by then, having faced her second opponent, Jung Hyun, a provocateur who relentlessly targeted her legs with low kicks, seemingly willing to resort to any means to win. Hajin endured numerous blows as Jung Hyun focused solely on her legs, relying on defensive maneuvers. Although Hajin's petite frame seemed defenseless, Time ran out before Jung Hyun could do anything more, leaving him with no option but to swallow his frustration. But Hajin's true misfortune was about to begin. During the break, a figure approached, offering her more rest time. Impressed by her resilience, Hajin didn't care, except to remind him to keep his promise not to touch Sejun. He'd assured her of his word, and thus the third match began. Each new contender that stepped onto the field left the audience in awe, especially the monstrous figure in human form, Lee Jung-hyun. As time passed, Hajin sat conversing with her psychiatrist, who was surprised by her recollection of events. Hajin remained determined to keep her secrets to herself, not wanting to burden anyone. However, the psychiatrist advised her against bearing it alone, suggesting she confide in loved ones or Sejun. Hajin hesitated, fearing to cause them more pain. Yet, the psychiatrist understood her reluctance to involve her family, but urged her to consider Sejun differently. If he knew, he would blame himself greatly. Hajin smiled at this, resolved to keep her secret from him, feeling anxious about how Sejun would react if he found out about that day's events. After standing still and listening to the entire story, rage surged to the forefront of Sejun's mind. He raised a heavy brick, intending to smash it into Junghyu's head, but redirected it toward Hajin. She would try to live well, as if nothing had ever happened in her life. Outside the training room, Asin advised Jo Hyun that if he wanted to use the punching bag after class, he could go ahead, given his past boxing experience. Jo Hyun, somewhat hesitant, asked if Asin was okay with it. Asin assured him, stating that he would inquire with the manager, who also had a background in combat sports, ensuring Jo Hyun would likely be welcomed. Only then did Jo Hyun recall that he had never met the manager before. Asin explained that the manager was too busy dealing with rent payments, and he asked Jo Hyun a favor. Asin mentioned Sejun, noting his inability to stay calm and fearing what reckless actions he might take without someone level-headed like Jo Hyun by his side, to prevent him from harming himself. Returning to the present, when the brick was about to land on Junghyu's face, Jo Hyun used his entire body to push Sejun aside, causing him to pause his action. Sejun, enraged and disregarding factions, attempted to punch Jo Hyun, who swiftly dodged. Jo Hyun tried to calm him down, but Sejun, lacking any reason, charged at him. Everyone present would have to die, so don't try to stop me. Jo Hyun quickly evaded Sejun's grasp and delivered a strong blow to his abdomen, a move known as a body shot, enough to momentarily bring Sejun back to his senses. Sejun winced in pain, but also became more alert. Jo Hyun reminded him that if he didn't want to end up in jail, he shouldn't act so foolishly, allowing his emotions to dominate. Sejun stood up, clutching his stomach, realizing the severity of his actions. He then turned to Jungyu, inquiring about the continuation of the story. Jungyu hesitated, stating that the fight was still ongoing because Hajin hadn't fainted yet. Sejun pressed on, asking about her final opponent. Jungyu couldn't recall his name precisely, but it seemed to be a representative from Hain, another lunatic who forced her to participate. In the final match, they would only compete in Jiu-jitsu. Sejun, upon hearing this, immediately asked Jo Hyun about the sponsor he mentioned earlier, who was also one of the competitors. Sejun realized that this was his target, but information about him was scarce, and Jo Hyun was not well informed either. At this moment, Jungyu spoke up. He had heard some interesting news, though it was just a rumor, but it was spreading among the athletes. While he was in the middle of speaking, he was suddenly hit in the face by a knee strike. It was the security guard from before. Jo Hyun and Sejun were stunned. Manager Kim appeared. "Didn't I tell you everything needs to be kept a secret, athlete son Jo Hyun?" Jo Hyun hesitated, not understanding why he appeared here. "Of course, it's to deal with those who break their commitments," Manager Kim said. Sejun immediately turned and questioned him. "Are you spying on us?" Manager Kim laughed it off. "Not using honorifics right from the first meeting? Truly as rude as I've heard." Sejun wondered if he knew him. Manager Kim laughed. "Of course I know you. You're the boyfriend of Hajin. You look quite handsome after losing weight." Sejun didn't let that deceitful mouth speak any further, and he grabbed his neck, asking why they treated Hajin like that. Manager Kim pondered and looked behind, "No problem, we were just having a little chat." It turned out the tall guy had silently moved behind Sejun. Jo Hyun stood in front and reminded him to step back, saying this was a threat. The giant stepped back without hesitation. Continuing the conversation with Manager Kim, he answered Sejun's previous question. "The purpose is clear, isn't it? It's for money." Keywords like high school girls fighting and Jiu-Jitsu are enough to attract thousands of viewers. Immoral people are willing to pay for this. It's all about money that led to this situation. As Sejun was about to punch the annoying manager, Jo Hyun was suddenly hit in the face by the giant. It was obvious he was a boxer, a heavyweight. Jo Hyun analyzed his large body and heavy movements, so he only needed to be quick to land a punch. But his punch didn't affect the giant at all. The giant mocked him. When a villain stands with the righteous, it means he has become weak. Just as Sejun was about to step in to help, Manager Kim told him shocking news. To add more excitement, I thoughtfully told the athlete with a grudge against Hajin in the second match about her current whereabouts as a little surprise gift. Manager Kim laughed. "It's just a coincidence that Hajin's aunt's house is not far from here. So who will you choose? Your beloved Hajin or your teammate's son Jo Hyun?" Jo Hyun shouted, "What are you waiting for? Go to Hajin now." But turning around, Sejun had already disappeared. There was no need for Jo Hyun to tell him to go. On the street, a suspicious guy was closely following Hajin. She seemed unaware of the imminent danger. Jo Hyun felt indignant. Where does this girl need healing? She's still smiling happily while I'm living in anger. As Jo Hyun was getting closer to her, a loud voice called out Seo Hajin. Both she and the guy were startled. It was Hajin's father. He hurried to his daughter. Seeing that it wasn't an easy target anymore, Jo Hyun left. Her father anxiously escorted her home, glancing at where Jo Hyun had just left. At this moment, he was angrily hiding behind a wall. Hajin's phone suddenly rang. It was Sejun calling. When he learned she was with her father, he breathed a sigh of relief and said that was good. Sejun on the other end was sweating profusely, covering up and lying to her that he was just exercising. He said he would text her later when he got home. Sejun was worried that Guy might still be lingering around her house, so he planned to go there anyway. Hajin and her father had arrived home. Her father reminded her to invite Sejun for a meal sometime. She cheerfully agreed, saying they must have beef. The two of them were joking when the elevator reached their floor. Jo Hyun, standing below, noted where the elevator stopped and counted the floors to pinpoint Hajin's apartment. He seemed to have figured it out, the first apartment on the 13th floor. He called Manager Kim to report this and reminded him of their prior agreement. Manager Kim assured him he hadn't forgotten what Jo Hyun wanted, while also cautioning him to avoid getting caught. With a few fabrications, the victim's side wouldn't be able to do anything. He thought Jo Hyun probably wouldn't encounter Sejun now. After all, he had already given Sejun a photo of him. After hanging up, he focused on his conversation with athlete Jo Hyun, hoping that after taking a few hits, Jo Hyun would cooperate with him. Jo Hyun, still somewhat regretful, had hoped to resolve everything today. He was about to light a cigarette when someone bumped into him. Already in a foul mood, he turned and cursed, "Are your eyes just for decoration, you dog?" Sejun immediately apologized. Jo Hyun sneered at him for not paying attention and making him drop his cigarette, telling him to pick it up. Sejun politely bent down to pick up the cigarette. As he looked up, he noticed a detail and asked Jo Hyun if he played sports, because his body seemed quite fit. Jo Hyun, bewildered, replied that he did a bit of training. Sejun, smiling friendly, complimented him, asking if he did gym workouts. Jo Hyun, amused, boasted that his muscles were both flexible and strong, unlike those of gym-goers. He proudly stated that kickboxing was a sport for genuine men. While he was mid-sentence, he took a punch to the face from Sejun. Even as he fell backward, he was confused, yelling, "What the hell are you doing, you bastard?" Sejun coldly asked him if he was the thug sent by Manager Kim. Jo Hyun, taking a defensive stance, denied knowing him and threatened him, saying he wouldn't get away today. As he prepared to deliver a high kick, Sejun quickly spotted the opening. He aimed a powerful strike to lower Jo Hyun's morale, and decisively kicked straight, sending a heartfelt greeting to Jung Hyun's little friend. Jung Hyun's eyes and mouth were watering. He clutched his injured comrade tightly and cursed at Sejun incoherently. Sejun looked down at him, warning him. "What exactly do you want?" lurking around Hajin. Jung Hyun ignored the question, instead threatening him. "Do you even know what you're doing to people around you?" It seemed he still didn't know Sejun's true identity. Therefore, Sejun showed no mercy, pressing Jung Hyun's head down with his foot, and then forcefully stomping, causing his face to hit the concrete ground. Jung Hyun screamed as blood gushed from his nose uncontrollably. Sejun told him to stop pretending, accusing him of being the kickboxer who attacked Hajin. Jung Hyun, one hand covering his bleeding mouth and the other in a defensive position, yelled, "I don't know anyone named Kim Jong Hyun." Sejun, resting his chin on his hand, pondered, "Did I make a mistake? Are you not the person Manager Kim mentioned?" Jung Hyun added, "Manager Kim? I don't know who that is." As Jung Hyun slowly stood up, he criticized Sejun for his lack of honorifics and assaulting an innocent person, threatening to call the police. He fumbled for his phone, eyeing Sejun warily, thinking that if he pretended to call the cops, Sejun would flee in fear. Sejun, his expression indifferent, replied, "I think you misunderstood. I'm just a foolish idiot. I apologize," and then punched Jung Hyun again. Jung Hyun continued his pathetic act, flailing his arms and legs, questioning if Sejun wanted to go to jail. Sejun sighed, "You definitely won't call the police." Seeing Jung Hyun's confusion, he explained, "I only mentioned a representative, not the specific representative Hain. So stop acting like an idiot, you bastard. You better come at me now." Jung Hyun, regretfully realizing he missed the chance for a surprise attack, wondered who Sejun was and his relationship with Hajin. Sejun bluntly told him, "You don't need to know that. The only thing you need to know now is that I will make sure you won't be able to exercise anymore." Jung Hyun, spitting, laughed, thinking that a few punches made Sejun believe he was a good fighter. He mocked Sejun, saying a weak punch like that couldn't defeat him. To prove it, Sejun threw another punch at him, but this time it wasn't so easy. Jung Hyun swiftly dodged and then repeatedly punched Sejun in the face, telling him to wake up and stop deluding himself. When Jung Hyun habitually tried to kick Sejun, he suddenly stopped and stepped back. Sejun smirked, "What's the matter? Can't kick?" Enraged by this, Jung Hyun charged at Sejun, throwing several punches, all of which Sejun defended effectively. Sejun felt the punch had some force. Clearly, Jung Hyun had received proper training. However, compared to Jo Hyun's punches, both speed and power were significantly lacking. If that was the case, Sejun could completely block his punch at the right moment. Immediately, Sejun lowered himself, aiming at Jung Hyun's shin, intending to use Jiu-jitsu to take him down. But at that moment, Jung Hyun kicked Sejun's face sideways, calmly saying, "I was just pretending to be dumb. You look like a stupid dog." Not even a second of acting cool, he suddenly trembled, clutching his groin in pain from overexertion. He cursed at Sejun, then used his foot to flip the unconscious Sejun over, and raised his leg to return everything he had just received. In that split second, a figure dashed in, knocking Jung Hyun over. Being shoved multiple times without reason, he angrily shouted, "Who the hell is it now?" "Oh, you mean me? I am a police officer of the Republic of Korea." Jung Hyun was stunned. If it was a police officer, things could get tricky. The officer approached, saying, "You should come with me obediently. Let's not make this more tiring for both of us." But before he could finish his sentence, Jung Hyun turned and bolted. Fear seemed to outweigh the pain in his lower body. When the officer turned back to check on Sejun, he recognized him as a student. Sejun woke up from his temporary blackout, thanked the officer, and said he was fine and didn't need to go to the hospital. The officer shared that Hajin's father had called earlier, reporting a suspicious person following his daughter, so he came to check the situation. Fortunately, he happened to pass by Sejun. The officer inquired if the person earlier was related to Hajin's case, but Sejun chose to remain silent. The officer advised Sejun to cooperate with them so that the case could be resolved quickly, and he wouldn't get into any legal trouble. Sejun stood up, politely declining, saying if he had any information, he would inform the police. He told them to do what they could, and as for himself, he smiled and said, "I'll do what I must now." At the meeting with Hajin, he felt lucky that his wounds healed quickly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known what convincing reason to give. He felt the kick wasn't too strong but was quick. Indeed, he had underestimated his opponent. He thought he might need to find another way, as this method wasn't effective. Suddenly, Hajin appeared in the frame, startling him. Hajin teased, raising her phone for a selfie. "Were you planning to secretly film some girl?" Flustered, he denied it, saying he was just checking for nose hair. Hajin pulled his head down. "Then let's take a commemorative photo together." The photo captured Sejun's annoyed face. They couldn't take a decent picture at all. Hajin decided not to give up, determined to get a proper photo of the two of them. After some playful chaos, they entered the movie theater. Sejun felt somewhat relieved that Hajin could comfortably be in a crowded place, though she sometimes still felt shy and surprised by certain things. Hajin seemed to have improved so much that a stranger wouldn't notice anything unusual unless they paid close attention. Sejun believed Hajin was a resilient girl. If she had to fight herself, she wouldn't be easily defeated. To help Hajin recover in a safe environment, he needed to eliminate all external dangers. To achieve that, he had to become stronger and train himself to be rational and cold-headed. If this were a game, he would be in a high-level monster area. To avoid continuous defeats, he must clear out all the similar-level enemies to level up first. At the gym, the brown-haired student laughed out loud with joy. The victim here was Jo Hyun. He pointed at Jo Hyun's shirt, laughing as if he couldn't breathe. "It must be boxing is the bester, you kiddo." Asen, wanting to save face for Jo Hyun, stood nearby, trying to stifle his laughter so much that his body shook. Jo Hyun was confused. "What's so funny? Are you looking down on boxing?" The three of them were stunned, staring at him. Indeed, there was no improvement in his sense of humor. Jo Hyun protested, "I have a sense of humor too." "But my friend, don't be so stubborn. Face your inner self and admit your flaws. You're as bland as water." While they were joking, Sejun poked his head in from the door. Asen was puzzled. "Didn't you take the day off? What are you doing here?" Just then, Hajin appeared from behind Sejun. Her presence made everyone much happier and more welcoming. She ran towards Asen and asked how he was doing. "Still doing well. Come here and give me a hug to ease my longing." Caught off guard by Hajin's sudden attack, Asen swiftly flipped backward. "No way, kiddo, I just finished training and I'm all sweaty." Nevertheless, Hajin didn't care and lunged at Asen. Hajin sat up, surprised by a new face. The brown-haired student introduced Jo Hyun. "Speaking of this friend here, there are exactly 4 words. Boxing is the best." Jo Hyun's face darkened, and both Hajin and Sejun couldn't hold back their laughter at this cuteness. Hajin asked, "Weren't you learning Jiu-jitsu? Why are you a boxer now?" Asen explained, "For now, let's just let him punch the sandbag first." Sejun approached Jo Hyun, who immediately became cautious. "Are you going to tease me again?" Sejun simply asked, "Were you okay after getting hit that day?" Jo Hyun nonchalantly replied, "It's fine, I'm used to being hit a lot. The wounds are healing well." Sejun then asked Jo Hyun for a favor. "I want to know all the details about your standing kick. Just teach me everything you know, and I'll do whatever you ask." The manager, in tears, hugged Hajin and spun her around, then asked, "Is it because you haven't been training that you've gained weight?" Hajin, feeling awkward, replied, "You didn't have to say that last part. For the sake of our teacher-student relationship, just laugh it off." She then hugged him back, saying she was just joking. Whether she was serious or not, no one knew. Jo Hyun, seeing the manager, was surprised and asked, "Are you really the fighter Hogdogi?" It seemed the mysterious identity of the blue-capped man was revealed. He was one of the professional boxers in Korea. Everyone in the gym stared at him, amazed. Is that true? Such a cool identity. Clearly, he had introduced himself long ago, but none of the kids paid attention to what he said. Jo Hyun enthusiastically admired him. He once had a record of 6 consecutive wins in 20 matches. then retired in the same year at the peak of his career, an influencer in the Korean boxing world. Despite not wanting to brag, that amazing person is me. The gym fell silent, no one saying a word. Harry cheerfully said, "If you're that cool, treat us all to spicy tteokbokki." Do-hee, taken aback, asked, "What's this? You don't care about anything?" But next to him, Jo-hyun, eyes sparkling like a puppy's, looked at him with admiration. "You are my ideal model." Do-hee had heard a bit about Jo-hyun's story. "Do you mind? This gym doesn't just teach boxing." Jae was still cheerful. "I'm not worried about that. Even if I have to clean the toilets, I don't mind as long as I can stay close to my idol. Doggy, you go ahead. Feel free to use any sandbags or equipment." Then everyone went out to eat tteokbokki. Ta-jun and Hae-jin walked together. While walking, Ta-jun teased Hae-jin, saying she eats like a pig. It's true that times have changed. Sejun, once chubby like a pig, now asked Hae-jin, "Do you hug every man you're close to like that?" "He was just curious," he said. Hae-jin, embarrassed, teased him back. "Sejun, have you grown up and started getting jealous?" Sejun could only deflect, "It's late. Let's get inside." During break time at school, Sejun urged Jo-hyun to quickly teach him that kick. Jo-hyun was deep in thought about the name Yong-hyun. He was a long-time kickboxing player. Sejun probably didn't stand a chance against him, but fundamentally, he wasn't going to compete, but to fight. So the outcome was still uncertain. From now on, Sejun would have to stick to Jo-hyun 24 hours a day, starting with learning the punch in a crash course and sweeping through a few lower-ranked opponents to gain experience. Jo-hyun asked, "Do you know the most basic thing about boxing?" Sejun hesitated. "Is it whoever has the stronger punch and strikes first wins?" "No," Jo-hyun replied, "it's the skill of jumping rope. The important thing lies in the steps. The footwork is the biggest difference between a boxer and a non-boxer. For example, when Sejun grasps the opponent's rhythm, he could lure him to punch to the right, then quickly dodge to the left, and then, with all his strength, punch the opponent in the face." Sejun was stunned. "Why did I suddenly get punched?" Jo-hyun apologized. "Who knew you'd be too slow to dodge such a basic punch?" In summary, from today, Sejun would have to practice jumping rope during his free time. Jo-hyun laughed joyfully and left. Thus, the training course began. Sejun ran, panting, chasing after Jo-hyun, then did hundreds of rope jumps, and practiced hitting a tennis ball hung overhead to train his reflexes. Every miss meant getting hit by the ball in the face and being called an idiot by Jo-hyun. Finally, they practiced attacking each other. Time passed with these routines repeated daily. Both lay down, breathing heavily. Jo-hyun asked Sejun, "Do you have any aspirations after finishing the matter with Hae-jin?" Sejun wasn't sure. He didn't have any lofty goals. Jo-hyun expected this answer and sat up, moving on to the next training phase. In a small alley, two students, one fat and one thin, were walking and chatting happily. Suddenly, Sejun called out to the fat one, "Hey, pork soup!" The fat one was puzzled, but Sejun immediately punched him in the face. This was the next phase of Jo-hyun's plan. Practical combat with pork soup. Holding his face in pain, the fat one laughed like he had a short circuit. He stood up, improvising. Normally, in this situation, someone would ask, "Who are you?" But I won't. "Do you know why?" Before he could finish, Sejun punched him again. "As if I care." Pork soup was indignant. "Let me finish speaking first." Sejun, annoyed, said, "Shut up and fight." "Simply because I find your pants annoying." The fat one, wide-eyed, asked, "Do you even understand fashion?" "If that tight-fitting thing is fashion." Sejun would rather never know. He then landed several more punches. Furious, the fat one countered, "Come on, I'll show you what politeness means." Sejun was startled by his opponent's stance, recalling Jo-hyun's words about judo. If you're thrown to the ground, it means you're in danger. So the basic thing is not to let your opponent grab you. That's why we practice retreating like fools, remember? Jo-hyun reminded him to always keep a certain distance from the opponent. So, during a fight, use your long arms and speed to punch back before he grabs your collar. When it doesn't work, the opponent will get frustrated and aim for your lower body. At this point, retreat quickly to block his attack, and finally, decisively knock him down. But if you get caught, don't hope to escape a judo practitioner's grip. The fat one laughed. Enough playing around. From now on, there's no more martial arts, just aim for small parts, and bend each finger back. Pork Sook was shocked that Sejun would fight dirty, screaming as his fingers were bent out of shape. Sejun didn't give him a moment's rest, throwing a punch straight at the pig-headed guy's face. One down. Seeing this, the thin accomplice rushed at Sejun, who easily dodged and moved behind him, landing a strong punch to his waist. He quickly shifted to the next target, taking them down with full-force punches. The second, third, and fourth guys were swiftly dealt with. Sejun returned to the gym with a face full of bruises and trembling hands. Jo Hyun saw him and suggested he rest for a bit. Sejun refused immediately, insisting on continuing the training since he didn't have much time left. Jo Hyun advised him to stabilize his skills, emphasizing that even with improvement, Sejun might still not be a match for Jung Hyun. However, Sejun cut him off, saying he would find Jung Hyun this week. He couldn't let Hajin live in danger any longer. Outside, Accent silently stood behind the gym door. On the streets of Korea, Hajin's father and mother went to pick her up, using the excuse of creating family memories for their 25th wedding anniversary. He planned to generously take her to school and then have beef with his wife. Hearing this, Hajin flared up like a cat stepping on its tail, completely disagreeing. Behind them, Jung Hyun was envious, muttering as if only he had a family. Unable to find the right moment, he irritably pulled out a cigarette. He wouldn't give up that easily. Suddenly, the police officer representing justice from before approached. "Do you know this is a no-smoking area? Not in uniform." Jung Hyun arrogantly responded, "So now busybodies like you are all over the place. Do you think you're a cop or something?" The officer casually flashed his badge, causing Jung Hyun's attitude to change instantly. Turning around with a forced smile, Jung Hyun tried to smooth things over, but the officer demanded his ID. Trying to make peace, Jung Hyun promised not to do it again, but the officer ignored his words, clearly stating, "Kim Jong Hyun, height 1.7 meters, red hair, dumb-looking black eyes." Jung Hyun, taken aback, tried to deny it, but the officer insisted on seeing his ID. Sensing the situation worsening, Jung Hyun bolted, with the officer chasing him through the streets. Underestimating the officer's speed, Jung Hyun was soon cornered when a speeding car suddenly jumped onto the sidewalk, separating them. The driver leaned out, telling Jung Hyun to get in, mentioning manager Kim wanted to see him. Given 5 minutes, Jung Hyun quickly got in, and the car sped off, leaving the officer frustrated. Feeling lucky, Jung Hyun smugly remarked how timely the rescue was, only to be told to shut up by the driver. He summarized 2 points. First, Jung Hyun, still young, was given a chance for reformation. Second, as the driver removed his hood, he revealed himself as Asen. "Trash like you deserves to be torn apart," he stated. Realizing something was off, Jung Hyun tried to open the door, but it was locked. Asen continued lecturing, but Jung Hyun, not listening, threatened to call the police. Asen warned him not to act tough, saying one day he'd meet someone stronger, and his life would spiral downwards, which was happening right now. Jung Hyun angrily demanded the door be opened, attempting to punch Asen, who blocked it, grabbed his collar, and slammed him against the car. When Jung Hyun looked up, Asen was holding a sharp axe, ready to strike. Jung Hyun struggled and screamed, but couldn't stop the axe's descent. Instead of hitting him, the axe embedded itself deep in the car's floor, leaving a bleeding cut on Jung Hyun's nose. Asen calmly reassured him, "Don't worry, living a life like yours in hell would be torturous. Let me help you extend your life a bit. First, how about chopping off an arm? I'll count to 3, so prepare yourself." Perhaps in the face of death, Jung Hyun found a burst of strength, kicking Asen in the head and escaping his grasp. Looking for a way out from the madman, he glanced at the car window, deciding to break his head rather than die by Asen's hands. But unlike the cheap action movies, Jung Hyun, with a huge bump on his head, was flung back inside.